Howdy, my name is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Today we're going to continue looking at the SideGame library and what games did not make it. Now this is part 4 of the series, and in this I'm going to tell you the games that didn't make it and give a recommendation of games that I would prefer over the ones that I'm listing here. Without further ado, let's continue this look. The first game we're going to talk about is Muse. Now, Muse is a party game where you're going to be communicating an image to a team. You're trying to give a clue that's going to help out the team to figure out what you're talking about. Now, the thing that makes this game different than other party games is each team is responsible for kind of giving the rules that the clue giver has to follow. So they might have to sing a song or something like that, and it's up to the team to pick and choose what things are going to be used to confuse the opponents. So it's an interesting idea. You have a lot of player agency where you're able to commiserate and plan what is going to trip up the other person. But this does lead to a lot of downtime. It's a lot of thinking on the team's parts, and it has a lot of people sitting and doing nothing, and that really is what turned this game off for me. It has a cool idea with using these image cards and kind of confusing the opponents, but ultimately the downtime of this one really killed the game for me, and not a big fan. Now, a game that adds to this confusion aspect that does it really well, in my opinion, is Decrypto. In Decrypto, it is a word association game where you have a keyword and you're trying to give clues about this keyword. And everybody is going to be thinking at the same time in this one. And I think that really adds to the reduction of downtime, but you are still having to be clever in the clues you give because you are trying to get your team to guess them, but the opponents are also guessing them, so you want to make sure your clues are distinct enough and tricky enough to where both players, you're able to help your team without helping the other team. So I really enjoy the kind of the trickery and the quick thinking and the witty thinking of Decrypto, and the idea that everyone's playing all at the same time. So I really enjoyed Decrypto. Great game. The next game we're going to talk about is Mice and Mystics. Mice and Mystics, you play a group of knights and people from the royal court that have been shrunk down into creatures, and it's your job to stop this evil sorceress from taking over the kingdom, but you have to do it while you're in this mice form. So it has this great adventure story to it. The book, the writing is great. The gameplay is a little lacking, though. Very heavy on dice, and the terrain is a little confusing at times. The search system I think, could be better, but it is a solid game, but not one that stuck around in our library, mainly because it is a little bland, and it's just okay, in my opinion. It's not my favorite of this genre, of this dungeon crawl style. Now, a game that takes the idea of having these cool terrain pieces and interesting missions and bosses and really streamlines it well is Altar Quest. So in Altar Quest, one of the big features of the game is the terrain in the game. So the terrain itself has an ability that will be active, and each room you go into is going to reveal new terrain, and it's completely randomly generated, which is awesome. So I think Altar Quest does a great job of having this straight down to business dungeon crawl style game. It's very custom. You can change your characters each time you play. It has a campaign system if you would like to, but it's optional. So I think it's a lot easier to get into as you're not forced into this big story, and I think it does a great job at what it's setting out to do. So I really love the different terrain in this, and that is my replacement for Mice and Mystics. That is Altar Quest. The next game we're going to talk about is Munchkin Adventure Time. So this is Munchkin as a whole, but the copy we had was Munchkin Adventure Time. In this one, you are playing a character that is trying to level up to 10, and you do this by defeating monsters or playing cards that just level you up. Now, already you can kind of see where this is going. The cards are huge. Some of the cards are just clearly better than others, and this game is very much a pile on the winner game. It takes a very long time. You're going to be constantly getting close to leveling up, and everybody else is going to prevent you, and it's very much a pile on the person, very take-thatty, trying to prevent this person from winning until everybody just runs out of cards, and the person that happens to level up when nobody has a card to stop them is going to take the game. So it is a little charming at first. You'll play it a lot, be excited with the leveling up aspect. The characters are fun, but ultimately the game is kind of a slog. It's kind of boring at points, And it feels bad when you're constantly trying to achieve something and everybody is stopping you, and it's not very satisfying. So if you are looking for a game where you are trying to give that, take that, trying to stop other people from winning, but in a more crafty and a short time frame, I would recommend the game Rumble in the Dungeon. So Rumble in the Dungeon has you playing as these little characters, and these characters are going to, only you know who your characters are, but you can move any characters on the board. And I think that's great. It adds a bit of bluffing. It allows you to attack anybody you like, but you're not sure exactly who you're hitting, so you can't just prevent somebody from winning straight out. You have to be clever and have to predict their moves as well, and I think that adds to this game's success. I think they did a great job with this production. It has that dungeon theme that Munchkin has. It has that take that aspect where you can attack other players, but you're not quite sure exactly who you're hitting, and it does reward clever planning and play. So I really like Rumble in the Dungeon. I think they did a great job with this one. The next game we're going to talk about is Proving Grounds. So Proving Grounds is actually a solo-only game where you're going to be rolling dice in a gladiatorial arena. So this is a real-time game. You'll roll the dice and you will assign them to different areas after your time is up. And you're trying not to get doubles, if I recall. So the more of a specific number you have, the worse it's going to be. I don't remember everything from this game, but I remember it being very monotonous. There wasn't a lot of variance in the characters you were fighting, and a lot of times you are doing a tug of war on these character cards, and you'll be moving up these tracks, and every time you do that, you will just kind of go back and forth on the same character cards. So it seemed very boring. You're kind of doing the same thing every time. There was no really direct goal that you were reaching for. Yeah, you're trying to take out all these characters, but it seemed like it would just take forever. There was no exact set amount of time to when this would happen. It could go on forever if you just keep on getting that tug of war. And so I found that very frustrating and not a game that I really wanted to commit that much time to. And it's a solo game, so it's a little bit harder to get to the table and get people involved in. A great replacement for this is by the same designer, actually. This is Fuse. Fuse is a cooperative game that plays up to 5. Now, this is great because in this game you'll be rolling the dice, and it's real time, just like the other game, but you're placing them on communal cards and personal cards. Sorry, you're placing them on personal cards, but the dice are communal, so you have to say what you need. It promotes a lot of cooperation. It's very quick thinking. It can be punishing when you fail things, so it does have a similar aspect to Proving Grounds, but when you complete a card, that is the goal, and you can communicate about what things you need. Sometimes luck won't be on your side, but they do a great job in having a set time, so you know when the game will be over, and they have a set deck that you're getting through, so you can really rate yourself how you're doing as you play. And I think that's great. Each card has a unique puzzle that uses the numbers in different ways, so it really adds a lot to the conversation, and I think Fuse is a wonderful real-time cooperative game. One of the best, in my opinion. The next game we're going to talk about is Renegade. This is a cooperative or solo game where you're going to be moving around a board by playing cards in a small little deck building style, preventing these black pieces from grouping up while completing missions. And there are 3 missions in the game that you're trying to complete over 3 rounds. And so this is an interesting game. It's very, very jargony. A lot of the rules refer to specific pieces, but once you get past those rules, the game itself is very straightforward. You move around, you place these little colored discs on the board, you use the discs to help you complete your tasks. Now, unfortunately, this game is a little bit too simple, in my opinion. You have a character that has an ability that you're going to use, you have a deck that you'll be using, and you're upgrading based on the market that comes out, but the game itself is very straightforward in what it does. It presents a puzzle, and usually there's one right way to solve this puzzle. And that's the big thing that kind of deterred me from this game is it does present a puzzle, but as soon as you understand the concepts of the game, the puzzles are very straightforward and very easy. So I felt a lot of frustration with that. The deck building is fine, but the puzzle itself is not that exciting. I mean, it's a cool theme, cool system, but I would recommend a different deck building game, and that would be Heroes of Tenefyr. Heroes of Tenefyr, it offers that same choice of your character, and you are taking your character through this cooperative experience, but in this one it does not have a board, it's a little bit abstracted, where you're going through a dungeon. So each dungeon is a card, a monster that you'll be fighting through, and I think this is just a more straightforward game where you have these randomized puzzles and not something, and each step is a little puzzle as opposed to one large puzzle with an obvious answer. In this area, it's kind of got some push your luck mixed in with it, where you don't have all the information and you really have to figure out what you're going to do to make the best of your situation. In this game, the deck building is really awesome and really unique. You're going to be having a deck of cards that is your life force in each time you go in the dungeon, and every time you reveal cards from the deck, you can either keep them or discard them and draw new ones. So you really can get the perfect hand, or try to get it at least, but if you keep on dumping your hand, you're going to run out of stamina and you'll be out of the dungeon, so you can't help with future fights. So you're sometimes having to settle with something subpar and relying on your teammates. The leveling up system in this game is great. It's got great progression. It plays quickly. I think this game is wonderful. And if you're looking for a game with a little bit of light deck building and some great decisions and a great puzzle, I would recommend Heroes of Tenefyr. Great job on this game. The next game we're going to talk about is Robinson Crusoe. Now, this is very highly regarded. It is an interesting game. It is a punishing game, and in my opinion, it's kind of a boring game, unfortunately. The game uses a worker placement system in order to put your people onto a board to take actions. The whole premise is it's a scenario-based game where you are going to be trying to survive on an island and do a task of some sort, whether it be build some fires or, say, rescue a person or take videos of King Kong or explore a volcano. It's got a lot of ideas in it, but I think the core game itself is a little boring, where you're just kind of putting workers on a board and trying to survive. And the survival is simply roll a die, see what happens, hope that you have enough of a certain resource to keep your health up. And there's not a lot of dynamicness in this. The best part of this game is the event deck, but the event deck itself can also be very swingy because some cards might reappear later based on the decisions you make, and the dice rolling in this game can really crush you, and it's really frustrating when those sort of things happen. You'll commit your 2 workers to do something and roll the dice, and you might not achieve anything on your turn, and then that's very, very frustrating. Now, that being said, the game that I would play to replace this is this War of Mine. Now, this War of Mine takes the same feel. It's survival. It does have dice rolling. It does have the idea that it's very hard, very punishing. But this game is so interesting in what it does, and I think every piece of this game is super thematic. I think the exploration in this game is one of the best exploration systems I've ever seen. You're going to go to a location and you'll have a deck of cards that's based on the size or the closeness of your location, because you have more time to explore it. And every time you reveal a card, you have to make an instant decision as to what you're going to do here. It has push your luck. It has decisions where you can guarantee your results, and I think that's really welcome and really well done. I think they did a great job with this War of Mine. I think that it is super thematic. It does have those punishing aspects, and your decisions could result in just instant death, but you have multiple survivors, and you can always get more survivors. So there are ways to get around this. I feel like this game has a lot of possibilities when you play, and the scenarios that are available through the expansions are very welcome to changing up the formula. I think this War of Mine takes the idea of Robinson Crusoe's survival, adds a huge amount of narrative to it, and a lot of thematic, I think, appropriateness to it, and knocks it out of the park. Now, I will warn you, this War of Mine is a very depressing game. It does exactly what it sets out. It simulates being caught in the middle of a civil war. It is very sad. Some of the things that can happen, and it's a little shocking at some points. They do have options where you can remove some of the more grotesque things. You just ignore all the red events, I believe, but it is very much what it sets out to be, a depiction of a war-torn city. So this War of Mine is a fantastic experience. I would recommend this to anyone that is into something about survival and really exploring the aspects of a civil war like this. The next game we're going to talk about is Star Wars Imperial Assault. Now, Star Wars Imperial Assault is a great theme. It's Star Wars, you have troops, you're going around, and the big thing we're going to look at on this one is the campaign play. So you have one player that plays the Imperial group, they're all the bad guys, and then you have the other players that all play heroes. And each hero has their own ability, items, dice that they're going to be rolling, and they're trying to complete an objective. And the villain is trying to stop them. And whoever wins this battle will get some upgrade points going on to the next scenario. And it sounds great on paper. Playing the first scenario is fun. You have your basic characters, you're kind of getting a grip of it. But as soon as you start seeing how this game goes, it quickly becomes unfun, in my opinion. In this game, not the bad guy has pretty much all the information for the game, so they know exactly what the players are going to be trying to achieve, and the non-villain players are going to be very lost in the dark sometimes as to what their objectives are. In addition, the evil player has a very easy time of taking out individual characters, and really the villain player is very heavily sided onto them. So if you're going to play this game, you have to make sure that as the villain player, you are really going easy on the good guys. Otherwise, they just won't have a good time. They'll be a little miserable as you play. And I think that's a little frustrating where you have to hold back as a player. And I don't think that's very fun. I feel like, yeah, everybody else is going to have a good time, but are you? Is that fun for you? Is that something that you actually want to do as the villain? And I feel that's a little disheartening. In addition, the heroes might just not have a good time either. I remember there was a mission we were playing where the objective, you read what it says. It wasn't very clear on the instructions on the objective. It was very clear to the villain player because they had all the information, but the good guys only got a snippet of information that wasn't exact as to what they were doing. And they found that very frustrating. It really soured that experience for them, but even giving clues and hints as the bad guy, it was very frustrating for both players. And so I don't really like these games where it's one versus all, where you really have to pull your punches. And I think that there are many games that do this in a better way. Now, that being said, one of the games that does this really well is very different, but very similar at the same time. This is another one versus all game, Catacombs. Now, in Catacombs, you are having a dungeon crawl, but it's dexterity based. So if you want to throw a fireball, you flick a fireball actually on the board. If you want to go punch something, you flick your character to punch the thing. If you hit it, you deal some damage. Really cool, really awesome, really straightforward on its mechanics. It ties the theme in really well. And I think that it does a great job with the one versus all because the heroes are really powerful. And the heroes are going to be taking out these rooms, so everybody can go all out in this game, and I think that's a lot of fun. I think the positioning is huge, where you're going to have to hide from things, and I think that it opens up a lot of play for both players. So I really like Catacombs. I think they did a great job with the system, and for that one versus all feeling, both sides can go all out, and I think it's super fun that way. So really enjoy Catacombs. They did a great job. The next game we're going to talk about is Tsuro. In Tsuro, you are going to be laying tiles on a central board to create paths, and when you create these paths, your whole goal is to eliminate the other players, and you do this by connecting their paths off the board. So this game is relatively quick, about 15 to 20 minutes, but it is completely based on surviving yourself and taking out your opponents. It's fine, in my opinion. Luckily, it's short enough to where the player elimination isn't huge, but the player elimination can get a little frustrating for certain people. You can feel like other people are targeting you. You can feel like you're pigeonholed, like you really don't have much of a decision because you just need to stay away from people. So you've got to play the tiles, but it also can be a little frustrating because the tiles you draw dictate where you can go. So unfortunately, I don't really recommend Tsuro. I think that there are better games that involve tile placement. And one game is a classic. We'll talk about this. This is Carcassonne. Carcassonne is a very classic, well-regarded tile placement game. Very straightforward on your turn. You put a tile and you got to make sure its features match. And you are trying to build out this central map to score points. Now, it's a very different feel, but it does have that tile placement. And I think that this is one of the best for a reason. People like this one a lot. Very straightforward. There's one quick modification for the rules on this. Make sure that you're drawing tiles at the end of the turn instead of the start of the turn, so you can kind of plan so that we can reduce the downtime. But overall, Carcassonne is very solid, and it's loved for a reason. So that's my replacement for Tsuro is Carcassonne. The next game that we got rid of is Tiny Epic Kingdoms. Now we have the ultra tiny version, the very small version. And this is a 3x, 4x game where you're going to be taking your kingdom and conquering the other players, essentially. Now, it uses a follow mechanic that I think is very good. I love follow mechanics in game, and that's what our replacement will use, is that follow mechanic. But the game itself is honestly a little bit on the boring side. Didn't really find it that exciting, didn't really do anything special, and it's not one that I would ever pull out over anything else. So that's really why Tiny Epic Kingdoms left, is it's just not that special. It's just okay. I would never ask to play this game, and I don't see anybody else asking to play it either. So that's why it's out of here. A replacement for this game, and I'm going to have two different ones on this one using the following mechanic. The first game is Race for the Galaxy. It uses the following mechanic really well, and it has you predicting at the same time. It's got simultaneous play, and it allows you to craft your own engine. Now, this is just for that following mechanic only, but I think Race for the Galaxy is great. Now, if you're looking for a game that is more combat-driven that uses a following mechanic, I would recommend Rising Sun. Rising Sun has you playing a Japanese clan, and the following mechanics are really interesting in this one, as you really are trying to negotiate as to what actions are being played. And all this following mechanic leads up to a giant combat phase. And I think that's a lot of fun, having two distinct parts of the game where you're preparing for war and then you have this giant war. And I think that's a blast. So Rising Sun is great in my opinion. And the way it uses that follow mechanic is really neat because everybody takes the action, but you are taking it at the best possible time. If you're buying something, you get to go first so that you can get the item. If you're moving, you get to go last so you can see where everybody else has moved. And I think that's super cool. In addition, it has an ally system where the players who are allied, they both get a bonus. So I think that's a really neat way to add to the follow mechanic. The last game we're going to talk about today is Pooh the card game. In Pooh the card game, you are throwing poop at each other, and you are monkeys. Go figure. You're going to be throwing poop at each other and trying to eliminate them by getting rid of all their hit points. Or I think it's just a certain amount of poop and you die. I think it's 15, something like that. But very straightforward, but not that exciting. On your turn, you throw poop, and you can wash the poop off yourself. Yeah, that's really it. Wouldn't recommend this. It takes a long time. It's player elimination, so you're going to be sitting out for a while if you are that unfortunate person who goes out first. And it's really not that exciting. The best part is the art and the theme and the cards' names, but I would not recommend this one. If you like this, take that style of game where you are going to be killing people, I would recommend Coup. It does this in a much faster time period. You only have 2 lives, so it's very real. You know exactly which cards, you know exactly how many lives you have, you know when the game's going to be over. But the way that you're able to target other players is by paying money to assassinate them or just paying a lot of money to coup them. And you still have that feeling of, I can pay money to take out this person, or I know who I'm attacking, I can hit this person, but it adds an aspect of bluffing and an aspect of prediction to your opponents. And I think that's very much appreciated. Its short play time is great because you are not sitting out forever when you are eliminated. The card play is interesting. The strategies that can evolve as you play are fun. And I think that it really captures this idea of, I got to stay alive and I got to make sure that I get people on my side and take out who I need to. I think it's really well done. I think they did a great job with Coup. So that's all the games that didn't make it this time for the library. If you have any questions about any of the games I talked about here, please let me know in the comments. If you have any suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, please let me know. Thanks so much for watching. SideGame Strong.